Welcome guys to METALLERIUM Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you about Mammon, this new album, My Body to the Worms, and more things related to the metal war in general. So we started by asking, how are you doing today, and how is the band, and how was the band during the last 3 years? Because your previous album, your homonymous album, was released in 2023.
I'm doing good. Band's very eager to release the album. It's been a long time coming since our last one, so we're super excited that it's nearly released. We're super thrilled how people have been responding to the singles so far. And yeah, we've just been very busy since the last album, finally storming out the gates after the world shut down for COVID. We were really itching to get out and play again, and we've done a lot of really great shows since then.
Hmm. Okay. So your previous self-titled release in 2023 was described as the moment you found your sound. So how does My Body of the Worms push that identity even further?
I think the second album was sort of like a transition album between the first one and this one, where we sort of like came into our own. And I think this one, the main addition to this one is having a second guitar player, because the last two albums just featured me and me doubling the parts. So I feel like all of us have sort of like been able to like leave behind any limitations when it comes to harmonies and that kind of thing. So we definitely were able to explore more of the sonic canvas with this one and really push ourselves to write more, I wouldn't say more complicated bits, but other like riffs and melodies, leads, compositions that we weren't able to do prior.
Hmm.
Yeah, just more layers and textures. I mean, if you listen to stuff like My Dying Bride, they've got beautiful dual guitar parts, and we always wanted to do that. So we felt with the one guitar, we always had to be conscious of what we could actually pull off live. So yeah, it was definitely great having the two guitarists now. And
Hmm.
backing vocals as well. Yeah.
Okay. Also, I've been reading a little stuff from this new album, and you mentioned that this new work is your most ambitious to date. Is there a central narrative or lyrical theme similar to the Fall from the Power concept in your last album, so that ties these new tracks together?
I'd say like Everyday More Sickened and Senseless Death kind of share similar lyrical themes, but then I wouldn't say there's one core, it's not a concept album by any means. Um, but there are similar themes that come up a lot, like religion, just the state of the world, the state of society, that kind of thing that feeds into the
And
songs. Themes like isolation and people growing very hateful and mistrusting of each other, that kind of thing. Amish, do you have anything to add? Yeah, I was just going to say isolation is one of the core themes as well that sort of Matthew has explored like in different ways within the songs, and how like online echo chambers and like how all of that leads to hatred and division, that kind of thing. And I feel like those themes are explored through a different lens throughout most of the songs. So like we said, it's not really a concept album, but there are certain recurring themes within it.
mm, okay. So now the music video for Departed has a distinct, like a 90s gothic western sound, especially for the vibe. So what drew you to the aesthetic, and how does this represent the broader atmosphere of this album? Oh,
Um, Departed kind of came around as a bit of a happy accident because we've always wanted to do like a gothic western song, because Johnny and I are big fans of the band Wayfarer. Amish has always loved the song by Watain they wrote on, and that stands like very different to the rest of Watain's stuff. And then Sam and I are big fans of the old 80s goth stuff, so we love Fields of the Nephilim. So we just really like that old Western Gothic aesthetic. And then when Departed was taking shape, the song kind of just took on that quality. And then for the music video, we knew we just had to fully lean into it to realize the whole atmosphere of it.
hmm. Okay, okay. Now, this album was mixed by you, Amesh, and then mastered by the legendary Fredrik Nordstrom. So, how this collaboration influenced the final crushing sound you were aiming for?
Look, when I was learning sound engineering, Frederick was like one of my heroes and still is, always will be, because he worked on like the old Dimmu Borgir stuff, Arch Enemy, that kind of thing, which has like a very distinct 90s European sound, which is kind of what we were aiming for with this album as well. So like when even in the mixing stage, the tones and stuff we went for this time around are sort of different to what we used like prior. Like we changed amplifiers, we used like Mesa rectifiers, PV 5150s, all that stuff that was sort of like, significant in the 90s. And after putting all of that together and laying the foundations down, Fred sort of like, put the icing on top and put his sheen on it and sort of brought that 90s sound out. And he was the perfect engineer to do that because he sort of was pivotal in that era. And that's the flavor we sort of wanted for this album.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we wanted it to be a bit of a departure from the tones of the first album, and then we were still kind of in that realm in the second album where we were still on in murkier, fuzzier territory. We wanted it to be like much more crisp and crushing this time around.
Okay, okay. I've been listening a lot of times this new album, My Body to the Worms, and your music is like a cocktail, like Funeral Doom, like a slush and black metal, and blah. There's a lot of stuff in there. So when you composing, do you intentionally set it out to mix these genres, or does the suffocating atmosphere emerge naturally during the rehearsals?
I think that's a really cool way of sort of analyzing and calling it a cocktail. That's fun. No, so like we do something, I don't know whether it's unique, but sort of old school where we write the songs together in the studio rehearsal room. We don't like we might bring a riff from home or an idea from home, but we are very collaborative in our approach. So we'll all be in the same room jamming a song, and that's how a song comes to fruition. And we each have very similar interests in music, but also very different interests in music. And we don't really limit ourselves saying we're gonna write a black metal song or doom metal song, whatever sounds good and suits that song in the moment, and whatever sort of invokes a certain energy, we'll just roll with and then refine it so it fits like a general context and everything fits in. But everyone has different influences and everyone has different ideas, and we bring it all and just put it together live.
Yeah, and we often have happy coincidences where someone's like, "Oh, I have this riff that I wanted to use, and it just fits perfectly with what you just brought in," and then you combine the two, and it just seems to organically work together. Um, we don't say we're gonna be prog doom or anything. We just kind of write what we want to do, and yeah, this is the result. We don't
Hmm.
want to become too much of one specific thing either. Like we don't want to just be a black metal band or just be a doom metal band, because I think we'd find it a bit limiting.
Okay, okay, nice, nice. So now, other track that captured my attention is the Elixir, and you use the Nosferatu imaginary in your recent merch. Horror seems to be a major influence in your kind of music. Also, Departed, so Departed has like this gothic western 90s. So, and how much do classic horror cinema and literally played into the songwriting?
Um, Funnily enough, the Elixir one was another just practice room improv vocal that kind of ended up sticking. We were thinking it was just going to be a placeholder, but when we tried out other ideas, we just decided that the Nosferatu one was the catchiest and just worked best. But obviously, we're all big fans of horror movies and general nerd culture, uh, video games, all that kind of stuff. So like that all influences us when we're putting together the imagery and the lyrics and just the overall atmosphere.
And there were like a few vampire movies that sort of influenced the production of Elixir, like Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire, and even like Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, the new one. It was convenient timing that came out, and that sort of inspired like the few sound effects and stuff that you'd find littered through the song. We were just like, oh well, if it's going to be a song about vampires, we should kind of make like the song kind of the album version kind of spooky with the screeches and that kind of thing. So it was definitely inspired by like those movies of old, but it was never like a contrived thing where we sort of set out to do something cinematic. It sort of happened organically.
Okay, okay. Reading a lot of reviews for the previous album and a couple of this new one, mostly all the people say that Matthew, you have a wide range of vocal styles, from sorrowful to deadly fury. So how do you decide which vocal character fits in particular section of a song?
I'll generally try out a few. Like, um, I don't want to just scream the whole way through a song, ideally. There are some songs where that just works, but I'll try out a few vocal parts and then pick the one that works better. Sometimes there's an obvious choice where if it's a very open and anthemic bit, I can use my kind of raspy, clean yelling voice. If there's a completely clean bit, then that's obviously the perfect time to try out some clean vocals. I'm a big fan of doing baritone lower vocals because I've been influenced by the likes of Nick Cave and 80s goth stuff like Sisters of Mercy. Yeah, I just want to do as much as I can pull off and keep pushing myself.
Hmm. Okay, okay, okay. Now, so and on your self-titled record, you experimented with mock synthesizers and mellotrons. How have these non-metal instruments been integrated in new tracks for this new album?
I think this time around, like King's Last Lament was definitely the synth heavy one we did last time. I think it was like a byproduct of what we were listening to at the time. This time around, I think the instrumental tracks sort of feature more of that kind of thing. Like At the Threshold of Eternity has a piano that I played and has a little bit of like I call it the Terminator synth at the start. So we sort of wanted to bring a little bit of that back into this album, but not sort of have it across the other songs because a lot of the other songs have like their distinct soundscape sections, but those are all done on guitar. So we didn't also like it was mainly about finding a balance and not overdoing it. So I think like if you listen to Angel's Grace, that's got like the heavy reverby texture at the end that's done by reverb on the guitar, sort of simulating like a church organ type thing. And then Senseless Death has like the lush clean bit. So like it was sort of like the same thing that we did with the second album, but just done through the lens of a guitar. But then I guess when it came to the interludes, we were like, oh, we kind of want to bring like a synth or something back. And that's why for like Threshold of Eternity, I think is a good example of where we sort of did that.
Mm.
Yeah, so we are big fans of those instruments and sounds. Like I make in my hobby time synth music, but I think we've been a bit hesitant to like incorporate it too much into the main songs because replicating it live is not something we already have five people in the band. Getting a sixth person to handle all the synthesizers on a stage would be a bit difficult for us. So we don't want to write stuff that we're not going to pull off live, and we don't want to lean too heavy on the synth side of things. We prefer to keep that for the interludes.
Okay, okay. So your sound relies on a massive wall of reverb and distortion. Are there specific holy grail pedals, perhaps HM2 or Boutique Fuzz, so that are essential for achieving that suffocating Mammon strum atmosphere?
When it comes to reverb, 100% the TC Electronic Hall of Fame. This has been my go-to for like the last three albums because you can do all these custom like tone prints, I think they call them, within the pedal. And like a lot of the reverb sounds sound like organ patches, and then it just really comes out real nice with distortion. So that's been a staple as part of our sound. Also, heavy drum reverb when I was mixing it, like cathedral reverb on the drums. I think the snare had like three different reverb lengths that we mixed in. Matthew's vocals are also very wet sounding. There's like chorus and a whole bunch of stuff. Chorus is the other effect we use on guitar as well. And in terms of like, I think it's just like all those old black metal mixes were pretty wet sounding in the 90s, and that's sort of what we wanted to replicate. And in terms of the distortion, like we mentioned earlier, like it's just a different character that we used this time using 90s amps. We didn't really use fuzz. I think Elixir was the only song that had fuzz in the intro. But everything else has just been straight up like amp heavy, like Mesa rectifiers and PVs, and a little bit of Marshall for the leads.
Okay, okay. Other detail that I've been hearing of this new album is that your bass, Sam Talbot, brought the classical guitar sensibility to the bass. So, how this technical background influence the way you write the low end to ensure it's not just heavy but also emotive?
I think Sam is a beast of his own, where he's like classically trained, but then is so versatile where he can play like literally any genre. And like I think where his playing really comes through. I mean, it's amazing what he does on the heavy stuff. But like when you listen to the clean sections, like on Sense of Death, he does like a lot of like there's a lot of movement in the bass. And I think that does come from his classical roots initially, but also like is a product of just the music he listens to. That's not just metal.
And he has a very out of the box way of thinking. Like he'll come up with rhythms that none of us would think of. Just has a real different way of looking at it and plays entirely with his fingers, no picks allowed, but still gets that crushing attack on the bass. So yeah.
Hmm. Okay, okay, okay. Now, talking about more about the future for this new album, obviously, the plans and more things. So, what kind of plans do you have for Mammon Strong and this new album? And perhaps you already perhaps release more videos. You will come the first time to Latin America. Who knows? What kind of plans do you know? Do you have?
Like coming to Latin America would be awesome, just because like we know like the metal scene there is so killer. And like even from all the videos and stuff you watch, I mean, if you take like even like bands like Megadeth, like Buenos Aires and like Argentina is like their best, the most successful venue that the city that they play. So Latin America would be awesome, but definitely looking at sort of spreading our music internationally, and like Europe is definitely on the cards. But at the moment, we're focusing on getting the album out and doing the Australian dates. And there is an international support tour that's in the pipeline. I don't think I'm allowed to reveal the details just yet that we're looking for in October, September. But definitely talks are in place for us to come and travel internationally, because I feel like we've reached that stage now where we want to sort of do that. We've already done Japan, which worked out really well for us, and we sort of want to do more of that. But yeah, Latin America would be amazing to do one day. It's just a massively long flight for us, is all.
Yeah, if you know any good bookers that are keen to help us come over, would we just want to play to as many people as possible. So yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, you said it. You said, Amesh, you ran shows in Japan in 2024 and have shared stage with the Titans like My Dying Bride and Rotten Christ. So, how have this international experience changed your perspective on the global doom scene?
I think it's just like it teaches you, like, I mean, a lot of these bands we played with, especially My Dying Bride and Rotting Christ, and even Hellhammer, like just meeting the people and hearing their stories like is quite inspiring, because like they've all done what we've done, but like 20, 30 years ago. And just hearing how they sort of became successful has really helped us, and how to stay humble as well, because all these guys have been really lovely to work with and super humble. But it also just goes to show that like I think the main thing we take from these things is just like you play with these bands and you're inspired by their sound. We'll take a little piece of that and bring it into our music. But also just making those connections. So when we decide to like eventually go abroad and play, it would be awesome to sort of tee up with those bands in their home countries and play shows with them too.
Hmm. Okay, okay. Now you singing with Hammerheart Records. It's like a major milestone in your career. So, what does this partnership mean for the band's reach outside of the Australian local scene?
Well, it's already evident that we're talking with someone in Latin America, because we've never got an opportunity to talk to so many metalheads from all over the world about our music, and that's been really great already. We're seeing reviews come in from all over the world, which is awesome. People sharing our stuff in mags all over the world, something we've never had before. So we're super happy with that.
Yeah, we've had to use Google Translate quite a lot this time, which is a good sign.
Okay, okay. Now talking about more the Melbourne scene and local roots in for the Mammoth Strong. So Melbourne has a legendary reputation for slash and grit. So has how has performing an iconic local venues like the Tote or the Bendigo Hotel shape your identity compared to the international stage you recently graced?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We definitely stand out with the general stand apart from the general Melbourne sound. I think it helped that our first album was kind of more in that vein, and we've slowly drip fed the European funeral death doom kind of stuff to the people. So they've been along for the journey with us as we've evolved. But yeah, these venues are just classic, and they feel kind of like home now after playing them so many times.
Yeah, and like for example, the Departed music video was shot on the upstairs level of the Bendigo Hotel.
Mhm.
So we've sort of wanted to bring a little bit of that back into the album as well. So like, I mean, we wouldn't be here today if not for the local venues like the Tote and the Bendigo Hotel. That sort of gave us a platform to sort of get our sound out there, and they've been really good to us even now. Like 8 years down the track. So yeah, that's why we wanted to pay a bit of reverence to where we started and where we continue to play. Hence why the Bendigo Hotel is the venue for Departed. But yeah, like it's a rite of passage as well. Like we played some of the bigger venues in Melbourne, have been privileged to do so, like Northcote Theatre and stuff like that, which is an entirely different experience in itself. But there's something really magical about the club and pub shows where you're like right there with the audience and you can feel the energy right in your face. And that's something we wouldn't want to ever sort of like trade away.
Hmm. Okay, okay. Now talking about especially for the identity for the Aussie Doom. So there is a specific bleakness often associated with the Australian Doom. So do you feel that kinship with other local heavyweights, or do you see Mammon Strong as an outlier in the Victorian extreme metal scene?
I think, yeah, I touched on that in the last question a bit. We're definitely we've got our foot in the door of a lot of subgenres here at the moment. Like we play with death metal bands, doom bands, black metal bands, which is good because we get to play to diverse audiences. Um, Generally, there's still a lot of stoner doom happening in Australia, and a lot of sludge and more crusty, kind of filthy underground genres.
Yeah, it's really a melting pot of all the extreme. There's like I think Melbourne is quite experimental as well with its sound, just because people are sort of open to that kind of thing, and that sort of changes depending where you go in Australia. I mean, there are other. If you take Australia as a whole, there's other bands that sort of do the Euro Doom sound, like Mournful Congregation, Malignant Aura, who are sort of more in our vein. But yeah, the local doom scene at the moment sort of popping off. There's like it started off like pure stoner, but then there's more death doom and stuff sort of trickling in at the moment. But I think sludge would sort of be the heaviest and most dominant sort of subgenre within doom at the moment.
Amazing, amazing. So now looking back to your 2018 formation, what was the most difficult trial by fire the band faced while trying to establish a stoner slash black sound in the city with such a diverse music history?
I think it was just like because none of us came from like I mean we've all played in bands before. Like Matthew and I didn't grow up in Australia like initially, so we played like in I'm from Sri Lanka, Matthew's from South Africa, so we played like in bands there, but like we didn't have like a proper like history of playing in Australia. So when we and no one did. Like Nick was straight out of school on drums, and Sam and I were in uni together. So like just sort of like finding out what to do and where to go was a little bit tricky because we were just like, right, we've got the music, we've got the band. How do we get shows? How do we get on like decent lineups, that kind of thing? So I feel like that was the trickiest part of sort of getting ourselves out there. But in terms of lineup, like the lineup and stuff like that, that was all pretty solid because like we had the four of us and we haven't had a single lineup change. We've only had a lineup addition. So I feel like in terms of trials and tribulations, a lot of that was sort of easier for us. But yeah, it was just mainly what to do and how to do it. That was
But
what we had to
having
figure
said
out.
that, Melbourne embraced us pretty quickly, so we felt very welcome.
Okay,
Up,
okay.
finding
So,
our feet.
okay, amazing, amazing. So, we are very close to this interview, guys. And one of the question is: your music is often described as a being bulldozed by grief. In a live setting, how do you use volume and physical presence to ensure the audience feels that weight rather than just hearing it?
Well, I always get told off for having my guitars too loud because there's a specific decibel limit in Australia that we got to maintain. So we're always trying to push that. Like I think it's a balance between volume and dynamics really, where like volume is one thing which sort of creates that massive wall of sound type thing, but then dynamics is what really is the gut punch, because doom can be sort of like a slow burn, but I think with our music there's ebbs and flows where you have bits that are like very visceral and in your face, and I think it's about just playing with those dynamics and sort of just like, I think that's the main thing that we sort of aim to do, across all the instruments, vocals, everything, about how you can like create the maximum impact with the sections you have.
Yeah, and we kind of treat our songs in like a narrative sense. So we're telling a story and we're very animated on stage. So people are usually pretty engrossed when we're performing. So we reel them in and then Amish blasts their heads off with his loud guitars.
Okay, okay, nice, nice. And well, the last question, and just for fun, this one. So, well, right now, usually, as I said, you have a lot of textures in your music, black, doom, slash, and more styles in there. So, if we relate this kind of topic with a different theme, where perhaps you hear about the synesthesia matters, when people hears the music and see colors, smell, taste, or no, smell and taste and everything. So if we summarize everything and relate with the last album, so what kind of odors, colors, and smells, tastes that the listeners will find in this new record?
That's an interesting question. I don't know
Color,
what's.
like the orange and reds of a burning world.
I thought you were going to say the oranges and reds of a McDonald's for a second. No, but yeah, I guess like the album art sort of hints at that. I've always like, I don't see colors and stuff when I write stuff, but like I've always thought the color purple and like blues and like reds and violets are sort of like more associated with our sound, like kind of like a spectral canvas type of thing. That's how I'd best describe it. In terms of
Taste
smells,
wise,
I don't know. I don't really want to imagine what our music smells like.
taste wise, like it's ash.
Like ash and burnt, decaying. I guess that's how we put it.
Okay, okay, I understand. So, well, guys, we arrived to the sad moment of this interview. Thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure to speak with both. And obviously, this My Body of the Worms is a great album. Congratulations on this new one. And perhaps do you want to add something to your Latin American fans and obviously Metallerium followers?
Yeah, like thank you so much for the support. Like it really means the world to us that our music has got from like Melbourne all the way to South America. That's pretty unbelievable. And we really like hope to come to your part of the world and play music for you. But yeah, thank you so much for the support. It really means the world to us.
Yeah, thanks for checking out our music. Make a noise and let people know you want us to come play shows, and then hopefully we can make it happen one of these days.